My name is Vivian Christmas. I am on staff with a great team starting a new ministry here at the University of South Carolina. We've been here for a year, loving it. I moved from Florida, and I've been on staff with the Navigators for about 10 years. Let me tell you, this was not my plan for my life. High school and college me would have been very confused about my life decisions. Anyone who knew me then will tell you. I had a very, very set plan for my life. I was going to go to law school. I was going to work in international law or politics, and basically I was going to save the world. That was kind of my plan. I was super laser focused on succeeding, on making a difference, and that meant that my life completely revolved around me getting the best grades, around me getting the best internships, around the best service opportunities. And to be honest, I was pretty well on my way to making those things happen. We're going to come back to that, but I want you guys to think for yourselves. What are some things you would say you've lived for? Maybe what you've seen your parents or your roommates or your pastors live for. What purposes do you see in their lives or in your life? Y'all, it has been a deep source of depression and grief over the years to feel purposeless in life. As a middle schooler and an early high schooler, I really wrestled with depression. That was serious enough to get me thinking about ending my life. And a big piece of that, I think, was just what I shared, that my purpose was too small. It wasn't enough. I didn't understand the point of my life and why I was here. But then also, not just purposelessness, there are some good purposes we hear about, right? Some good things to live for. So you hear about raising a family, helping people, making a difference, getting a good job, settling in a house by a lake with a boat, making sure churches are growing, making money, experiencing new cultures. These are all things we hear are good, and in themselves they are. They are good gifts, good ways that God has given us to live. But brothers and sisters, let me tell you tonight, they are not enough. They are not enough. Guys, if you have ever ended the day wanting more, you know what I mean. You want to do more, you want to help more, you want to be more, you want to have more. And none of those good things are going to satisfy your true purpose. We're going to end wanting more if that's what we're after. So last week, Quentin talked about how we have a distinct identity. Tonight we are going to see that a distinct identity flows into a distinct purpose. So open your Bibles to 1 Corinthians 10:31. Paul wrote this. He's a missionary, and he's writing to a church that he had started in Corinth. We're going to spend a couple minutes in Corinthians here tonight. And he says here in this verse, "So whether you eat or drink, or whatever you do, do all to the glory of God." What do you notice about purpose in his words? Look at it. It's an interesting verse to sit in because it's in this whole part of the letter where Paul's writing about dealing with these arguments among the church members about what to eat and drink and how to worship and all these different things. And notice what he doesn't say. He doesn't say, like, make sure you eat this or make sure you drink that. He says, whatever it is you do, do it all to the glory of God. So the purpose is to reflect God's glory. The word glory can feel a little vague and impersonal and cold, but it captures God. It captures so much more than that. Think about the splendor of like a wealthy king, or laughter with good friends, or beauty of the most stunning piece of art. These are tiny examples of the warm, beautiful aspects of God's glory. And our whole purpose is to know and to reflect that glory. So, how do we reflect God's glory? If you're taking notes, draw a tree and draw 3 limbs out of it. This is our tree of purpose, if you will, our tree of reflecting God's glory. And on those limbs, I want you to write 3 things: imaging, intentional, and immortal. So that first branch, imaging, kind of a weird word, but there for a reason. So look at Genesis 1:27, Right there at the creation of the world, it says that God created man in his own image. Male and female, he created them. Meaning we were made to do right what Paul told us to do later, to look like God and to be a mirror of him to each other. I see God in you, you see God in me. That's how we were created. But we screwed that up real fast in the Garden of Eden by choosing to try to start reflecting our own glory over his, Adam and Eve, right in the beginning. But in order to reflect God's glory, really, we have to know him to be filled with him. They chose something else. Now, I'm not going to rehash all of what Quentin covered last week, but the important thing is this, y'all. Until we have the new distinct identity of Jesus within us, we cannot fulfill our true purpose. We are caught in the same trap of self-glorifying that Adam and Eve were caught in back in Genesis. And Paul actually talks about this pretty explicitly in another letter to the same church of Corinth in 2 Corinthians 3:18. He says, "And we all, with unveiled face, beholding the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image," there it is again, "from one degree of glory to another." So to rephrase what Paul's saying, when we gaze at Jesus and all of his glory, he is making us images of that same glory. We are restored to how he made us to be back in Genesis, little images of his greatness. So glory doesn't come from us. No, it doesn't. But it does come from his image within us. So now onto that second branch. Our first was imaging. The second is intentional. We do not just accidentally live with purpose in life. When, I might ask, was the last time you accidentally got in shape enough to run a marathon or accidentally got an A on your biochem test? Nothing that we do that has meaning, we come by accidentally. We have to choose to have intention to move towards those. That's the definition of what it means to have a purpose in something. And the same is true of reflecting God's glory. It doesn't come from us, like we just said, but it does show through us. And we get to be an active participant in that happening. And there are two main ways that we actively get to be intentional in reflecting his glory in our works and then in our words. So we'll start with works in Matthew 5:16. Jesus is giving a sermon to some crowds, and he says, "Let your light shine before others, that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven." In other words, live differently, y'all. Live intentionally in a way that people see the light that has shined on your life. And that word shine means to radiate brilliancy, like a prism. We can radiate the goodness of God to the world in the way that we live. That is good news, y'all, because it gives us a chance to live in our true purpose as images of beauty and grace. And it gives hope to those who see us, who see that beauty and grace within us. Friends, our world is rife with darkness. I do not need to tell you this. It fills our news, it fills our friends' lives, fills our personal stories. It's touched my life through my battles with sin, depression, grief over death, to name just a few. Darkness is global, it's all over, but it's also deeply personal. Grief and sin and evil have impacted every one of us and every single person that we encounter every single day. The world needs light. The world needs the glory of our good God. And Jesus is saying here, he is the light in the darkness, and because we are little images of him, we get to be lights in the darkness. Think about the countercultural ways of living that would show light to a hopeless world. Forgiving, I think about that. Being honest, caring about someone else more than yourself, serving people when you see their need, admitting when you're wrong. Maybe it's just being intentional to get to know someone else. Each one of those things is countercultural. It's intentional in a way of living as light, exposing and shining hope on the darkness around us. So I just moved in to a new home about 2 months ago. You can see a little bit of it here. A couple weeks after I moved in, I decided to drop some homemade cookies with a little note at each house right on my block. It's about 15 houses. And one older woman, Barbara, showed up at my door a couple hours later and shared that no one in the last 10 to 15 years who had lived in my home had tried to meet any of their neighbors. And it was such a small thing. It's such a small thing to drop cookies and a note, and honestly fun because I just really like to bake. But it gave me the chance to show kindness and intentionality and have a conversation in a world of selfishness and cruelty and pain. Because we can show up to life for our small ambitions or we can show up to life ready to engage a hopeless world with light. And the second way that we do that, first is through our works. The second is we intentionally reflect God's glory through our words. So back in 2 Corinthians, again, Paul's writing to Corinth, in chapter 5, verse 20, Paul writes a pretty famous verse. He says, "Therefore we are ambassadors for Christ, God making his appeal through us. We implore you on behalf of Christ, be reconciled to God." We could spend forever in this verse, y'all, but we're just going to observe a couple things about being ambassadors here. So in the U.S., if you didn't know, ambassadors are appointed by the president. He names a few, and then they're confirmed by the Senate. He names a few, he chooses one, confirmed by the Senate. That means that when the U.S. sends an ambassador overseas, this country's leaders are saying, "We trust you to represent who we are to this other nation." So imagine, picture this with me for a second. Imagine an ambassador from the U.S. going to another country and just going by the embassy and saying, "The president says he wants an agreement," and then leaving to go like spend his time touring museums and art galleries. He'd get fired real fast because he wasn't doing his full job, right? He technically delivered a message, but he failed to develop any relationship with those he was going to deliver it to. And as ambassadors of Christ, we have the joy of not just reflecting God's glory by reporting some facts about him. Yes, we have a specific message. Like Paul says, imploring people to be reconciled to God, to share the gospel. That is our message. But like an ambassador, we also have the responsibility and privilege of developing relationship with those outside of the kingdom we're representing. We live in a world with a totally different identity than ours now, a world that we no longer belong to. As ambassadors, we're going to that world not just to announce a message and then go out touring the museums and art galleries of this world, right? We get to go to develop relationships and use our words to reflect the goodness of our glorious Jesus to the nations around us, to the people, to the neighbor, to the fellow intern, to the classmate, to the people, the nations around us. So word, work both. We have to show up. We have to live with intention towards our distinct purpose. And then lastly, the third branch, our purpose is immortal. Kind of an intense word because it's a real reality, y'all. As believers, our purpose doesn't end when we die. Rather, the distinct purpose that we have lived with continues on into eternity. In Revelation 22, 3-4, at the end of the Bible, God is talking about what our forever with him will be like, and he says that his people will see his face, and his name will be written on their foreheads. Stop and think, have you ever loved something enough that you wrote your name on it? Kind of like an Andy writing his name on Woody in Toy Story situation. I grew up with 4 siblings. This was very essential sometimes to know what was whose, or there were still many fights, but this helped a little bit. But that's what God is doing for us. Forever and ever, he wants to show us off as his kids, little images of his glory. Y'all, we are not headed into an existence of being bored angels playing harps on clouds. There's a lot of things wrong with that picture, but that's one of them. We are not going to be bored. We have an eternal reality ahead, which also means that the intention that we live with now has eternal implications. We can live our lives aiming at some decent things, right? Getting a degree, finding a spouse, getting a good job, or we can live with our hearts and our minds set on eternity. In 2 Corinthians 4:18, Paul is talking, this is just before the verse we just read, and Paul is talking about what he and others are suffering as missionaries. And listen to what he says here. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. Since what is seen is temporary, it's fleeting, it's transient, it's going away. But what is unseen is eternal, is forever, is immortal. So this man, Paul, again, he was killed for what he was saying and doing, for the purpose that he chose to live with. Why? Why would he do that? Because he knew that it would be worth it in eternity. He decided it was worth the suffering to show God's glory to the world because he knew that he was making a difference that would last forever. Friends, even if we were satisfied in this life with getting what we were after here, we are one day going to stand before God and look into forever. What do we want? What do I want to stand there and look with? Joy at having given my life to what will continue immortally? or regret because all that I gave my life for evaporated like the mist. Just gone in a second. And that's what sets us apart from the world, y'all. Others can say, we help people too, we do good things too, and that's so true. We cannot go around pretending non-believers don't do good things. That would be ridiculous. But the reality is their help, their good things, they die with them, maybe even before. But we get to aim for an immortal impact by imaging an eternal God to the world. So this summer, my friends, you have a limited time where you are. Whether it's at a job, in an internship, in a class at home, wherever it is, you are not going to be there forever. Likely, you'll only be there for the summer. And let me ask, what are you going to do with that time? Are you going to fill it with Netflix, with going to work, with eating, sleeping, and doing it again? No. All of those things are not bad. In fact, most are necessary. Please eat and sleep and drink and all the things. But what if your orientation around them changed? What if you spent this summer practicing living with a bigger purpose than getting a good review as an intern or a paycheck from your job? With that, let me clarify something. Reflecting God's glory doesn't mean not succeeding in those things. It doesn't mean being a bad intern or being a bad employee. Remember where we started. Paul says, do everything to the glory of God. So glorifying God means doing all those things with greater purpose in mind, right? It means serving God, not by being nice to everyone at work and sharing the gospel, but doing a terrible job at your job. It means showing up right where you are, right where God has put you as roommates, as kids, as students, as employees, and being distinctive and glorifying God in each one of those places. So like I shared, I lived my whole early life obsessed with getting to the next success in life. I really mean that, y'all. I was obsessed. And it was with a good aim, and, good aim, helping people, not wrong. But when I went to college and I grew my relationship with God, I began to realize something. I could be a great student. I could go on to help lots and lots of people. And I could still miss the point. I could still do it all as someone obsessed with myself and my goals and my impact and what I was going to do. Or I could choose to be a light, an ambassador while I finished school. And let me be clear again, choosing God's purpose for me did not start when I came on NAV staff. It started when I asked God, what do you look like? And how do I show the world that? You do not have to be on NAV staff or be a pastor to do this. You can live with a purpose that images God, is intentional in choice, and is immortal in impact right where you are, friends.